I think it would have to be a 2 out of 10 would not recommend.
Hinurewa?
I probably would say 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Shane?
9 out of 10. The landlord and the high earner out of me, been good. This government's been good to me in the high end of town, but because I'm not the person that likes to kick the ladder out behind me, I give them a 2 out of 10. The race baiting and them and this government allowed to do what David Seymour has been doing over the last 6 months is atrocious.
Okay, so that's a 9 and a 2, but not exactly an 11. Tania, what's your rationale for your number?
So the ideology of this government is one that I just haven't experienced in my adult life in politics in this country before. And, it really scares me, actually. You know, we had punching down on groups that are farthest away from power, like tangata whaikaha, like our takatapui trans whānau as well. And it brings up in me a sense of foreboding that we are heading down the track that I experienced in the UK after the Blair-Brown government. Austerity, ultimately driving at the privatisation of public services, dead-catting a highly divisive issue, which in the UK was Brexit. Here is te tiriti. And that has not turned out well for the United Kingdom. You know, they are a fractured country.
So, Hinurewa, are you disappointed? And what is your rationale around your number? You've gone straight down the middle for 5, which was surprisingly low, I would have thought, for someone who's, been a loyal National Party person.
Well, I'm still loyal and always will be. I can't help myself wanting to vote for the right vote. But I suppose I'm giving a 5 out of 5 because there's still room for improvement. We're only in the first year of implementation, and I suppose I'm looking at it from an economic development perspective and what does that look like for our country. Inflation is coming down, interest rates are looking good, but it doesn't mean the cost of living is still high for our people. It means income retention is not good. It means that employment rates are still high. Vocational education is concerned. We've got people leaving the country. So that's why I'm giving it 5 out of 5.
What's something good that they're doing, Shane?
Well,
what the government is doing?
To be honest, Mona, I don't really see a lot of good. Unemployment, you're quite right, is screaming high. We're losing 2,000 people a week to Australia, many Māori families. I've never seen sort of empty houses as quick as we currently have. And, when you've got unemployment of 5.6%, that means for Māori 9%, that means for young Māori 22%, and they're the economic victims of a dedicated policy to get interest rates down at the cost of unemployment. And, what I do know is once you get to double figures in unemployment, it becomes generational. You can't just pick up a job next week. And it's a sad old story where Māori economically are the last on the bus, but the first off, and that's what we've seen under this government.
What are you seeing in the communities that you engage with, Tania?
Well, economic development for whom? So we, unfortunately, spanning back 40 years now, this really predictable pattern. So a recession, and we are going into a recession, for Māori will be deep and it will be long. And as Shane said, the intergenerational consequences of that are really profound. So it's, it's not just unemployment and labour market participation, it's also our businesses. Mm-hmm. So, we've got an increasing number of businesses closing down. A quarter of them are in construction. Guess where Māori-owned businesses are heavily concentrated in?
So, Hinurewa, of course, the government is reducing spending in the public health sector, including in health and justice. Is it possible to balance the cutting the spending with still delivering public services for people in really critical areas?
That's a big question and a tough question, and I wish I had the answers on that particular one. And I don't, because we know what the level of cuts have been made into communities. I mean, I was with a group of people just recently in Pouwhare. 35 of their programs have been cut with this particular government, and, it keeps rolling on. But, in this particular coalition and with the MPs and with our government agencies, they only make the cuts if the evidence is not stacking up. So who's providing that resources? Who's providing that information? at the end of the day. So,
Evidence seems to be a word that pops up quite a bit, doesn't it, Shane?
It doesn't stack up. Why would you cut $30 million out of a $100 million project in terms of teaching Te Reo teachers, other than having an ideology, out of a $5 billion budget? So the evidence doesn't stack up. Why would you cut excise duty for big tobacco, $200 million a year, which would go a long way to feeding the services that are needed? Why would you do that? Only if you had an ideology, and that's what this is about. Why would you give tax cuts to me and burden our tamariki with $17 billion worth of loans for those tax cuts, unless you have an ideology?
So Tania, the Prime Minister often says, hey, we have a mandate. We were voted and we have a mandate. Does that mean to do anything?
No. I mean, what we have now is a series of ideologically driven projects. So to Shane's point about the tobacco, and you have the minister, writing things in her briefing, because the tobacco industry is on its knees in New Zealand. So what? So, and against the advice of Treasury and the Ministry of Health and Welfare, Science, the reform of the Arms Act, and you've got a former spokesperson for the gun lobby presiding over that. It's just incredibly difficult to see that there is any integrity in the rhetoric of, we're evidence-based.
Kia ora. Hey, more with the panel after the break. So Hinurewa, how would you rate the Prime Minister's leadership? I'm going to ask you all. How would you rate the Prime Minister's leadership?
That's a pretty tough question, but I would rate his leadership as good. He seems to be keeping it together, the coalition, and that's a good thing. They're not arguing in the press, which is good. What I hear through the grapevine and through our colleagues is that he's working well with New Zealand First, and of course with the infrastructure fund that's currently out there. We need to see some good traction there for our communities and Māori especially. He is very focused on the message. And the message is, improving cost of living, getting crime rates down, getting inflation rates down, making sure that at the end of the day that we have a society where our people have good education. So I go, he's doing okay.
Shane?
I think he's mediocre, to be honest. I think he's not handling the coalition partners very well. He's allowed both Winston, but more to it, David Seymour to launch a cultural war against our people, and I think it's a diversion from where the economy is really at. Very interesting, Moana. They had the temperature of the boardroom. David Seymour scored particularly low in the lower half of the cabinet, and that was simply because even business said this is a diversion. We don't need this. Stop it and focus on the economy. So that's my view of the Prime Minister.
We've been trying to reach out to the Prime Minister for an interview and have been unsuccessful. So is he across his portfolios, do you think? Because it seems like he says a lot. I'm not aware of that. Yeah. I haven't been advised on that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a stock standard answer, but I think it probably goes to his coalition partners, the thruple, rather than him necessarily being over the subject matter of it. He's got very capable lieutenants and the likes of Louise Upston and Nicola Willis, but I think the tension there is between the actual coalition partners. If I was being kind, I would say the difficult role he has in being able to manage.
I suppose you've got to figure out where you draw the line, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And, but he's pushed out the line when it comes, say, to the treaty principle. Well, what he could have done is said, yes, I've got a coalition agreement. We're going to have select committees. We're going to run it for 6 weeks and then we'll bring it to an end. He's did that with the Fast Track Act. 500. Yeah, interesting enough, the 140. How many? 149. Out of those 149 people, $500 million worth of donations at the last election. This sort of thing doesn't go well.
So they campaigned on transparency and democracy. So
it's very difficult to see that transparency. You know, we've talked about the Arms Act review and the
Parliament.
heated. No, but like to have someone who is a former spokesperson on one very, particular side. None of this bodes well for, perception of transparency, and that's what matters.
I think he's actually being very transparent in what he is saying. He doesn't, he may not deviate from the plan as much as people want, but at least he's saying, this is he said this is our 100-day plan. He's delivered on it. He's now articulated his next 100-day plan, which you still keep on reading to think where he's heading. So how much more transparency do we want from him? What does it look like for us?
What does transparency look like for us? It looks like stop bullshitting when you say that you've sacked 6,000 public servants and frontline services are not going to be affected. You sacked the telephone operator at Miramore Hospital that organises the appointments. People don't come to the appointment. It affects the front line. You sacked the skivvy at the local police station who's no longer there. It means the cop has to be in taking down the notes, etc. That's the level of transparency I want. And the other thing is that the Fast Track Act, what I want to know is who are these people who have applied, and why don't they go through the same normal process and be held accountable like all of us at this table would be in terms of if they break the RMA or environmental court, they're able to go around, circumvent all of that. That's not transparency.
Yeah. And the Fast Track, I think, is a really good example of raises questions about probity and conflict of interest.
The Treaty Principles Bill is a grenade, and the Waitangi Tribunal described it as a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist. So how do we deal with it?
Well, first off, my personal opinion is I'm not sure why we're going through this process because I don't think it's required or necessary. However, it's part of the coalition agreement, and it's something that, that one of our coalition partners wanted, and they've all agreed to it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that if I was to talk to many of my colleagues within the National Party, we're also too going, why is this occurring? Because it is divisive, and, the worst case scenario could cause civil unrest. But when I look at it in its entirety, perhaps we do need to have this conversation. Perhaps it does need to come to the forefront in this particular way. What we hope and pray for, and I will hold my hands together like this, is that Luxon and those who in the select committee will stick to what they have said, and that this will not go past the second reading.
Do you think that National would lose a lot of support from its traditional voters if it does?
Yes, it would.
How helpful is this discussion?
Well, it's not a discussion. It's not an honest discussion. And I think that the Act will use it as leverage if they don't get this bill over the line. Citizen-initiated referenda that will be funded like we've never seen before.
So what do you think there, Tania? How do we deal with this? Because there's a growing frustration out there, not just from Māori either. There's church leaders, there's educators, academics, the legal fraternity.
This is part of the culture war that they see themselves embarking on. And, Māori getting too uppity, what's all this te reo? Like, these are not, absolutely critical to the daily lives of people who are struggling with the cost of electricity, with the cost of, basics, keeping a roof over their head when we already have a massive kind of homelessness problem. And we're engaged in this.
One of the things I absolutely love is the fact that Māori mobilise. We're not silent to our own landscapes. That we actually have an opinion and we know how to share our opinion, like in this platform here. So I'm going, look, there is definitely hope.
I think we're going to come up with a really good plan for how we, as progressive, right-minded thinking people, Māori or Tauiwi, are going to resist these types of tactics to divide us, and be focused on a really positive vision of this country.
Kia ora, Tania. What about you, Shane?
Well, I hope that we see constant activism and constant protesting, and I think that's what we'll see.
Ka pai. Thank you very much, Shane. Hinurewa, Tania. Kia ora.
Kia ora.